So we've seen some incredible stuff.
We have.
And here we are now at Jacob's Well. And likely this is where Jacob's Well was, because wells don't move.
Right.
And this was where the story with the Samaritan woman and Jesus happens.
Yeah.
And it matters. I mean, what an incredible story. In fact, so many times you get a picture of Jesus' dialogue or this story, but this is spread out. This is a lot of verses. This mattered.
Yeah, a long exchange, actually. And obviously being a woman and being Samaritan, I mean, there were cultural barriers, gender barriers. It was all kinds of wrong, you know, and Jesus initiates this conversation with her.
Yeah.
And I love it because I feel like she's me and she's you. She was a woman that wanted to be loved, and she didn't always make the best decisions in trying to get that. And Jesus didn't judge. It was just like, I'm letting you know I know everything, and I'm still talking to you, and I still invite you. So I love this story because he overcomes a lot of barriers that should have kept her separate from him. And he's typical Jesus. He invites, you know, it's not a demand, not a command. It's like an invitation. He's like, girl, that temporary stuff, I got something that'll change you forever. So I love this story.
I love it because in this narrative, it displays that God does not care about our family baggage, our history, our ethnicity, our gender, that he will go above and beyond to even just have a conversation. And how life transforming a conversation can be. And so what I'm pulling away from this story is that if Jesus wasn't afraid of this woman's history, wasn't afraid of her reputation, then I don't want to be afraid of someone else's family drama or baggage or reputation. I want to have those conversations. I want to look them in the eye. I'm going to ask them their name, and I'm inspired to live like Jesus.
That's so good. I know. I love that. And I also love how intentional he was and how much time, like we say, there's a lot of verses, but how much time he took with her. He's like, this doesn't have to be like a short little passing, like, hey, how are you? Good, I'll pray for you. This is like, let's talk about your real life. Let's talk about your real stuff. Let's go there. And just learning from Jesus to do that with other people, be intentional, not just everybody be like, oh, hey, what's your name? Good, okay, I'll pray for you, but hey, no, what's going on in your life? How can I step in and help you and be more like Jesus in that way? So
Well, we're looking at a generation that is very divided. We have a lot of divides to cross. So this matters.
Yeah, it does. And I think that he teaches us an approach to love with truth and grace. Sometimes we go in for the jugular, and he's like, I'm gonna be patient and walk you through this conversation. And how precious that he lets us come to our own conclusion with this woman that ends up being a mouthpiece for him. So
good.
A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So the woman went away into a town and said to the people, come see a man. Can this be the Christ? So I'm standing right in front of what we believe is Jacob's Well, and it is not moved. It's been there for generations upon generations. I think we all live with this ache to be seen and noticed and pursued, and the woman at the well had that same need, whether she knew it or not. And this is why I love Jesus so much, because this is what he did for me. This is what he does for this woman on this day. He cuts through so many cultural barriers to do it. He breaks all the rules to make sure this woman not only is seen, but that she is rescued and saved and set apart for great purposes. When I originally read this story, I didn't understand exactly how many barriers Christ had to bust through to get to her. But I just want to mention some of them, because not only is it this testament to what kind of God we serve, but it's also an example of how we're to go in love. Because ultimately, once we're rescued and we follow Christ, we pick up our crosses and we do what he did. We actually live like he lived. So I want to go through some of these barriers. So number one, he crosses a gender divide. For a man and a woman to be alone at the well may not be the most suspicious thing, but for a man to initiate the conversation at this time in this day with this woman was shocking. Next, Jesus crosses this social divide. In verse 9, we see that he was a Jewish man speaking to a Samaritan woman, and he went out of his way to go through Samaria. Most religious Jews went around Samaria when they traveled because they did not believe the Samaritans were clean. They didn't want to mingle or talk to them. And then thirdly, to get to this woman, Jesus crosses a religious divide. In verse 9, he asks her for water. This is unheard of. The water would be considered unclean. Then there's this theological discussion they have together, a man taking a woman's questioning seriously and engaging her as an equal in a theological discussion. This is one of the longest dialogues with Jesus recorded in the scriptures, and it takes place with a Samaritan woman. Jesus could care less about our hierarchies and divisions and divides. He busts through all of them because what he cares about is the soul of a woman and the souls she is going to go and declare this good news to. You see, Jesus doesn't pursue us just for ourselves. He pursues us because of the people he wants to pursue through us. Another shock of this event is that the woman goes back into the city and actually leads with the very things she's been hiding from everybody. She likely came to the well in the middle of the day because she was ashamed of her choices and her lifestyle and where she found herself in life. There was a sense of isolation and shame to her story. And now she's no longer just not avoiding people. She runs into the city to the very people she has been hiding from. And she leads by saying, this man knew everything I had done. She leads with the very thing she's been trying to hide. And she lays it out for everybody and she tells them he's the Messiah. She's the evangelist to her city. She's the evangelist to her community. And this is why we get set free. This is why Jesus pursued us, so that we would know we are children of God, set apart for great purposes, and that we would live out those purposes, that we would run through every divide, that we would take every opportunity we have to go to the person that everybody else is overlooking. I think about my daughter, Kate. She is so good at this. It's like she can sniff out in a room who is feeling overlooked and unseen, and she'll go build a friendship with them. I think about her friendship with Rebecca from Rwanda. She came and she had some barriers. She couldn't speak English. She came to have a surgery on her club feet and she couldn't walk, so she's in a wheelchair. She's 10 years old at the time, and my daughter's about her age, and she goes over to her and realizes she doesn't speak English, and she picks her up out of her wheelchair and finds a hill, and the two of them together go roll down that hill 100 times. It was one of the first times while in the US that Rebecca had just laughed. And she laughed and laughed and laughed with my daughter. And Kate was determined to cross the divides, to cross the language divide, to cross the divide that could separate them from having a friendship. That precious girl, Rebecca, became one of my daughter's best friends. In fact, we're going to Rwanda this summer because they're both 17 now and they haven't seen each other in a long time. And we're going so that Kate can spend time with her. We get to bust down walls. We get to cross divides. It's who God made us to be, and honestly, the best stuff waits on the other side. 2 Corinthians 5 says this, all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation, that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore, listen to this, Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. Guys, this is the story we're a part of. We have been made the ambassadors of God, the ministers of reconciliation, because we were reconciled to God. Now we get to go give that reconciliation away. We have been reconciled to reconcile. Every time we are a part of that, God's story is built. God's love is displayed. We have this fiery, feisty love, the kind of love that is courageous to tear down walls that divide us. Because there is an enemy working awfully hard to build up those walls, and we're missing the best parts. Now, this is what I want you to hear and not miss. Know this, Jesus sees you. He notices you. He doesn't see you through your shame. He doesn't see you by your decisions that you made last night. If you are in Christ, he sees you through the unconditional love of the Father. Because of his shed blood on the cross, his righteousness that has become now your righteousness, rest in that. Rest in that. And then go give him away.